Hello and welcome to Midnight Mysteries. I'm your host, Shaylin Jade, and tonight we're exploring the strange accounts of the Demon House. Now, I don't know about you, but I am a lover of the darker side of the paranormal, and this one, it's quite disturbing. It's called the Demon House, or officially the Ammons Haunting. So, back in 2011, we're in Gary, Indiana. A family claimed their lives were torn apart by something really dark. We're talking levitation, unexplained voices, footprints appearing where they shouldn't, and that's only the beginning. There are official documents, police reports, and even a Catholic priest who tried to intervene. And the house? It ended up so infamous, a paranormal investigator bought it just to tear it down. And that paranormal investigator was the one and only Zach from Ghost Adventures. So I want you to get comfortable because we're going to peel back the layers of this story together. And you can tell me whether you think this was a true demonic haunting, a case of mass hysteria, or something else entirely. So let's step inside the demon house together. So let's set the scene. It's November 2011, and this family, Latoya Ammons, her 3 children, and her mum Rosa, just moved into a rental on Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana. It's nothing fancy, but it's supposed to be a fresh start for them. But right from the jump, something just feels off. The first weird thing to happen were flies. Everywhere, clinging to their screened-in porch. Rosa tried swatting them and spraying them, but they kept coming back, over and over. Later on, Rosa said it felt like a bad omen, like something was trying to get in. Then the noises started. Late at night, Rosa would hear footsteps coming up from the basement, creaking along the old wooden stairs. The first time, she thought maybe it was one of the kids, but when she checked, everyone was asleep. After that, the basement door would creak open on its own, as if someone was walking through. And it escalated. One night, Rosa fell asleep on the couch and was jolted awake by what she described as a shadowy figure pacing the living room. She said it looked like a tall, dark silhouette just walking back and forth. She jumped up, probably thinking it was an intruder, but it disappeared. No one was there, no forced entry, no broken windows, nothing. The only thing she found was a trail of wet, heavy boot prints across the carpet. The kids began to suffer too. Latoya's 12-year-old daughter had a friend over for a sleepover one night, as 12-year-olds do, laughing, eating snacks, until she was found floating, levitating above her bed, unconscious. Her friend screamed. Latoya and Rosa ran in. Everyone was panicking and praying, and eventually the girl floated gently back down like nothing had happened. When she woke up, she had no memory of it at all. Then the 2 boys started acting out. The older son was supposedly flung across the room by something unseen. No one touching him, just lifted and thrown. And the youngest, only 7 years old, began growling, saying things no child should ever say. Things like, "It's time to die. I will kill you." And his eyes would roll all the way back in his head. At this point, the family was terrified. This wasn't some flickering light or a cold spot you could shrug off. This was something that felt malicious. And so, desperate and afraid, Latoya decided to reach out for help. That decision would take them down a road nobody could have ever predicted. Latoya was so shaken to her core, she did what most of us might do in a situation like this. She called a doctor. Maybe there was a logical explanation, or maybe stress, maybe something medical. So she took the kids to see their physician on April 19th, 2012, to somehow try to explain everything that had been happening: the levitating, the growling, the shadowy figure, the boots across the living room. And the doctor, he listened, but he was baffled. In his notes, he described the whole thing as delusions of ghosts in the home. And you can't really blame him. He actually wrote in his medical notes hallucinations, delusional. Still, he didn't ignore them. Someone from his office called the police, worried that there might be more going on, maybe even a case of abuse or neglect. So the police showed up and things really took off. The kids were taken to the hospital for evaluation. I mean, imagine how that must have felt. One minute, you're trying to save your kids from something you think might be demonic, and the next, social workers and police are whisking them away for their own safety. But at the hospital, the scene got even wilder. The older boy was calm, rational, but the younger one, he was the one growling before. He started screaming and thrashing. Staff described him as completely out of control. One family case manager from the Department of Child Services, Valerie Washington, was sent to investigate. And what she saw left her speechless. She claimed she saw the youngest boy, this 7-year-old, lock eyes with his older brother and say in this deep, unnatural voice, "It's time to die." Then, and I know this sounds impossible, but Washington reported the boy walked backwards up the wall, flipped over his grandmother, and landed on the ground. Valerie Washington said she was so terrified she ran out of the room, and the nurse with her ran too. So, if people didn't believe the story before, you have witnesses of government employees like child safety services and healthcare professionals in a hospital witnessing this. Washington even put it in her DCS report. Everyone in that room were all said to back up the story as well. So now you have police, social workers, hospital staff, and a terrified family all tangled up in a case that no one can quite explain. A case that was about to draw in the church, the courts, and even a priest. Because when the hospital couldn't help and the police couldn't help, the family was kind of just left to turn to the church. And that's where the real battle began. So now the kids are being taken into protective custody because no one knows what to make of these events. And Latoya was now even more desperate than before for help. So she turned to her faith. Enter Father Michael, a Catholic priest with more than a decade of experience in Gary, Indiana. One morning, he gets a call basically saying, "We need an exorcism." The father agreed to meet with Latoya and her mother Rosa after Sunday Mass. He wanted to rule out anything natural before jumping to demons. So he went to the Carolina Street house. The family laid it all out for him: the footsteps, the shadows, the levitations, the backward wall walking. And while they were talking, Father Michael actually saw some weird things himself. He noticed a flickering bathroom light, but only when he looked away. When he stepped over to investigate, the flickering stopped. And then there were the Venetian blinds in the kitchen, swinging back and forth on their own with no breeze in the house. But that wasn't the worst of it. They showed him the basement, that dark, concrete-floored space with one patch of exposed dirt under the stairs. Rosa told him that's where the demons come from. It gave Father Michael chills. He blessed the house that day, sprinkling holy water, reading scripture, and praying through every single room. He told Latoya and Rosa that the place wasn't safe, that they needed to get out for a while. So they temporarily moved in with other family members. A few days later, the Department of Child Services needed to check on the house. So Latoya, Rosa, and the 2 other police officers from the initial visit went back to the Carolina Street home. The police officers visited after work hours. That's how invested they were. They were joined by Father Michael, two on-duty Lake County officers with a police dog, and DCS family case manager Samantha. Samantha, who was there in an official capacity, said she volunteered to go in Washington's place because Washington did not want to go back into that house. A county officer took his police dog around the home, but the dog didn't show interest in any particular area, according to the Lake County police records. Everyone else headed to the basement. One officer's radio glitched out. Another snapped a photo that appeared to show a shadowy figure in the window, even though nobody was inside. Samantha, the DCS worker, touched some strange liquid she saw dripping in the basement. She said it felt slippery yet sticky between her fingers. Father Michael told police he wanted to check the dirt under the stairs for a pentagram or personal objects that might have been cursed. He said a pentagram might indicate a demonic presence and possible portal to hell, according to a Lake County police report. Or if someone had died in the house and was buried under the stairs, that could also explain some paranormal activity. One of the police officers dug a 4-foot by 3-foot hole beneath the stairs, unearthing a pink press-on fingernail, a white pair of panties, a political shirt pin, a lid for a small cooking pan, socks with the bottoms cut off below the ankles, candy wrappers, and a heavy metal object that looked like a weight of some sorts, police records state. Finding nothing else, the officer replaced the dirt and raked it over. So he blessed some salt, which he said is a barrier to evil, and spread it under the stairs and throughout the rest of the basement. Samantha said she was later standing in the living room with the rest of the group when her left pinky finger started to tingle and whiten. Later, she complained it felt broken. Less than 10 minutes later, she said she felt as if she was having a panic attack. She couldn't breathe. So she walked outside to wait for the rest of the group. When the priest started questioning Ammons inside the house, she complained of a headache and shoulder pain, according to the police records. She joined Samantha outside too. One of the police officers said he left the house at nightfall. Now, this is a police officer who has been shot at and investigated murders, rapes, and armed robberies during more than his 3 decades on the force, and he said he wasn't staying in that house after dark. The other officers continued to walk through the home. On the main floor, they noticed an oil-like substance dripping from Venetian blinds in a bedroom, but couldn't figure out where it was coming from. So, to make sure Latoya or Rosa hadn't poured oil on the blinds, 2 of the officers used paper towels to clean it off. The officers sealed the room for 25 minutes and stood nearby so no one could walk in. When they went back in, the oil had reappeared. Father Michael told police that the liquid could be a manifestation of a paranormal or demonic presence. He wrote a report detailing his findings and asked Bishop Dale permission to perform an exorcism, and eventually he got the green light. He said that bishop had never authorized an exorcism in his 21 years serving as bishop. It was on, because this time they weren't just going to bless the house. They were going to try and cast out whatever had latched onto Latoya herself. So, picture this. You're Latoya Ammons. Your kids are in protective custody, your house feels like a literal portal to hell, and you're about to go through not just 1, but 3 exorcisms. Father Michael decided to start with what's called a minor exorcism. It doesn't need official church permission, but it still involves prayers, holy water, and commanding any evil spirit to leave. He performed it on Latoya in the home, surrounded by family and a couple of police officers who'd grown so invested in the case, they offered to stand by if things went sideways. During the prayers, Latoya convulsed, shaking so hard Father Michael worried she might pass out. She said she felt something inside her trying to fight back, almost like it didn't want to let go. A short time later, They got permission from the bishop to do a full-blown, sanctioned by the church Catholic exorcism, which is a pretty big deal. The ritual is longer, more intense, and is officially backed by the entire church. So over the next couple of months, he performed 2 more exorcisms, 2 in English, and the final one in Latin. He pressed a crucifix to Latoya's forehead, praying louder and louder until he felt the demon weaken. He described Latoya trembling, crying, even passing out from exhaustion. And in between these sessions, she kept praying. She searched online for the names of demons connected to flies, to children, to violence, because Catholic exorcists believe knowing the name of a demon gives you power over it. Latoya believed one name stuck out: Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies. Every piece seemed to fit. And in a weird, desperate kind of way, all this made sense to Latoya. She had to believe there was an enemy to fight, a reason for what was happening to her and her kids. Finally, after the 3rd exorcism, things started to calm down. The nightmares eased, the house felt lighter, Latoya felt like she could breathe again. And in the middle of all of this, she was still working to get her kids back, to show the courts that she was a capable parent. It's wild to think about. Trying to survive a haunting and a custody battle, but Latoya kept going. And as the dust started to settle, she and Rosa packed up and moved away from Carolina Street for good. It was the first time they'd felt safe in nearly a year. So after all the exorcisms, after moving to Indianapolis and settling into a new place, Latoya finally got her kids back. In late 2012, the court agreed the kids could come home, and DCS closed the case a few months later. For the first time in ages, they were a family again. Latoya called it the happiest day of her life, picking up her kids and seeing them jumping and screaming with relief. But as you can imagine, the questions didn't stop. There were social workers, psychologists, and even a few police officers who just couldn't settle on what had actually happened. Some professionals felt the kids had been coached, consciously or not, by Latoya. Others thought trauma and stress had created an environment where stories took on a life of their own. One psychologist wrote that the youngest boy, the one who supposedly walked up the wall, would act possessed whenever he was challenged or asked things he didn't want to answer. Then, minutes later, he'd quiz them about space travel and rocket suits, like a perfectly normal kid. And of course, skeptics pointed out that the landlord had never had any problems in the house before the Ammons family, and neither did the tenants after. So what does that tell us? But even with all those doubts, there were still witnesses who were absolutely convinced. One caseworker refused to go back in the house. Another, who'd visited the home, broke her ribs, her ankle, her hand, and got 3rd-degree burns within weeks after she was in that house. And she was sure something had followed her out. Like I keep saying, no neat ending, no easy explanation. And this story, it didn't stay buried. In 2014, paranormal investigator Zach Bagans, you might know him from Ghost Adventures, bought the Carolina Street house. He filmed a documentary called Demon House, claiming that even he suffered physical and mental effects from being there. I won't give away too much, but he did demolish the house after the investigation because he thought it was too dangerous to leave standing. Definitely go and check out that documentary. It is a really good watch. But one opinion I have on that is kind of a genie in a bottle situation. Maybe if there was something in the house, it was contained to the house. So what happens when you demolish the house? More recently, Netflix released a movie called The Deliverance, which is a fictionalized take on the Ammons story. It dramatizes the case, changing some details, but it's still rooted in this real-life haunting. So maybe it was a true demonic infestation. Maybe it was grief, trauma, or fear that just spun out of control. But either way, the legacy of Carolina Street is one people still talk about. Because in the end, you've got a house that made police officers and social workers too scared to return. So, what's that saying? So, after all of that, what do we actually believe? You've got a family who sincerely believes something evil took over their lives. You've got police, social workers, and even medical staff who said they saw things they just can't explain. But then you also have the psychologists, the skeptics, and child welfare workers who believed the kids were acting, maybe even subconsciously in line with their mother's fears. And I think that's what makes the Ammons case so unsettling. You can read through all the paperwork, hundreds of pages of police reports, DCS notes, medical evaluations, and still not find a clear answer. There's enough evidence to keep believers convinced and enough doubt to keep skeptics absolutely sure it was all a hoax. It also raises bigger questions about how far belief can go. And is it possible to be a mix of something paranormal and psychological all at the same time? I mean, the same week the kids were taken by DCS, a psychologist described them as healthy and rational, except when they talked about demons. Then everything changed. But there's one thing that we can say for sure. Something happened in that house. And whatever the truth was, it left a scar. Not just on the Ammons family, but on everyone who got close to the story. And here we are, years later, still talking about it. And another thing that raises some questions is why did only the Ammons family experience these things? Why not the tenants before and the tenants after? What was it about that particular family being in that particular house? Because when they moved after the exorcisms, everything was over. They didn't report anything else, and no tenants who lived in that house after reported any strange occurrences, let alone demonic possession. So I'm going to leave you with that thought. Thanks for joining us as we explored the story of the Demon House. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, give us a follow, leave a comment, rating, or review on wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps the show grow and allows us to keep telling these stories. And if you got your own brush with the unexplained, a haunting, a mystery, anything weird, you can always email us at midnightmysteriespodcast@outlook.com. We would love to hear it, and maybe even share it on a future episode. Next time, we're going to explore one of the most compelling reincarnation cases ever recorded, the Pollock twins. We'll be traveling to 1950s England to a quiet town where two young girls started to recount names, faces, and events from a life they had never lived. And that's next time on Midnight Mysteries.